Media bias in the Epstein files, a rhetorical analysis. The purpose of this presentation is to analyze how media bias and rhetorical strategies influence the way people understand major news stories. For this project, I chose to examine coverage of the Epstein files because it is a topic that has received attention from many different media organizations and has created different reactions among the public. The purpose of this analysis is not to decide which news organization is right or wrong. Instead, I will examine how different media outlets use rhetorical strategies to influence their audiences. I will use the all sides media bias chart to compare 5 news organizations from different political perspectives: MSNBC, the New York Times, Reuters, Fox News, and the New York Post. I will analyze how each outlet uses ethos, pathos, logos, framing, diction, and tone. I will also discuss how independent journalists and online creators cover major stories differently from traditional media, how different groups respond to news coverage, and how social media algorithms can influence the information people receive. The Epstein files are an important example of media rhetoric because the topic involves crime, politics, powerful individuals, government institutions, and public trust. Because the topic is complex, different media organizations often focus on different parts of the story and present information in different ways. The all-sides media bias chart is a tool that helps audiences compare news organizations and understand how different perspectives may influence coverage. The chart does not determine whether a source is truthful or false. Instead, it identifies patterns in how organizations present information, how their viewpoints may affect their reporting. The chart includes 5 categories: left, lean left, center, lean right, and right. Media bias can appear through rhetorical choices. Ethos refers to how a source builds credibility and trust. Pathos refers to how a source uses emotions to connect with an audience. Logos refers to the use of facts, evidence, and reasoning. Framing refers to which part of the story receives the most attention and how the story is presented. Diction and tone refer to the words a source chooses and the overall attitude of the message. Understanding these strategies help audiences look beyond headlines and analyze how information is being communicated. Left perspective, MSNBC. MSNBC is generally considered a left-leaning news organization. Its coverage of the Epstein files often focuses on accountability, government responsibility, and the experiences of victims. MSNBC builds ethos by using journalists, legal experts, and former officials to explain investigations and documents. These sources can help create credibility because the audience is hearing from people with knowledge or experience related to the topic. For pathos, MSNBC often focuses on the human impact of the case by discussing victims and the seriousness of the crimes. The coverage can create emotions such as sympathy, concern, and frustration. For logos, MSNBC uses timelines, documents, and expert explanations to connect different parts of the story. This helps viewers understand why questions about accountability continue. The framing used by MSNBC often presents the Epstein files as a story about whether powerful people and institutions are often being held responsible. The tone is usually serious and investigative. Lean left perspective, the New York Times. The New York Times is generally categorized as lean left. Its coverage often focuses on an investigation, legal documents, and historical context. The New York Times builds ethos through investigative reporting and the use of official records. By showing where information comes from, the publication builds trust with readers. For pathos, the New York Times usually takes a more controlled approach. Instead of relying on dramatic language, it creates emotional impact by explaining the experiences of victims and the effects of the crimes. For logos, the newspaper focuses on evidence, timelines, and explanations of legal processes. This approach helps readers understand complicated information step by step. The framing usually focuses on investigation and accountability. The diction is careful and professional, and the tone is more cautious compared with opinion-based media. Center perspective, Reuters. Reuters is generally considered a news organization. Its reporting style focuses on confirmed information, official sources, and factual updates. Reuters builds ethos by relying on court documents, government statements, and direct sources. The organization usually avoids strong opinions and focuses on what can be verified. Reuters uses less pathos compared with other outlets because its goal is mainly to inform rather than to create a strong emotional reaction. However, emotional impact can still appear when discussing victims and the seriousness of the crimes. The strongest rhetorical appeal used by Reuters is logos. The organization relies on evidence, timelines, and confirmed information. Reuters frames the Epstein files mainly as a legal and investigative issue. Its diction is neutral, and its tone is professional and straightforward. Lean right perspective. Fox News. Fox News is generally categorized as lean right. Its coverage often emphasizes government transparency, public trust, and questions about whether officials have provided enough information. Fox News builds ethos by using interviews with politicians, legal experts, and commentators. These voices provide explanations and opinions that influence how viewers understand the issues. For pathos, Fox News often focuses on feelings of frustration and distrust. Coverage may encourage viewers to question whether institutions have been transparent. For logos, Fox News often uses cause and effect reasoning. For example, coverage may compare promises of transparency with the information that has actually become available. The framing often focuses on accountability and government responsibility. The tone is usually more urgent and skeptical rather than center-focused reporting. Right perspective. New York Post. The New York Post is generally categorized as right, compared with the Reuters or New York Times. It often uses a more dramatic and attention-focused style. The New York Post builds ethos through public records, official statements, and interviews. However, it also uses stronger headlines and presentation choices to attract readers. Its strongest rhetorical appeal is often pathos. The publication uses emotional wording and uses strong presentation choices to create reactions such as curiosity, surprise, or concern. For logos, the New York Post includes facts and documents, but often presents them alongside with political reactions and controversy. The publication's framing focuses more on conflict, public reaction, and controversy. The diction is more direct and the tone is designed to quickly capture attention. Independent journalists and street journalism. In addition to traditional news organizations, many people now receive information from independent journalists, legal analysts, podcasters, and social media creators. These sources have changed how audiences learn about major events because they often explain information in a more direct and personal way. One example of independent media is legal analysis on YouTube from creators such as Legal Eagle. Legal analysis channels often focus on explaining court documents, legal terms, and how the justice system works. Their main rhetorical appeal is ethos because they build credibility through legal knowledge and experience. They also rely heavily on logos by focusing on evidence and explaining what information can and cannot be confirmed. A second example is independent political commentary through YouTube and podcasts. Shows like Breaking Points present news stories through discussion and analysis instead of traditional reporting. These types of creators often use framing by deciding which part of the story deserves the most attention. They also use pathos by connecting the audiences through emotions such as frustration, concern, or distrust. A third example is news-related content on TikTok. Many creators summarize current events in short videos designed for quick viewing. This can help audiences understand complicated topics, but it can also create problems because emotional and controversial content can spread faster than carefully researched information. Because of this, viewers must evaluate whether creators provide reliable sources and evidence. The biggest difference between independent creators and mainstream media is the relationship with the audience. Independent creators often communicate directly with viewers through comments, live streams, and discussions. This creates a stronger feeling of connection and community. However, independent media still requires critical thinking. A creator can be entertaining, knowledgeable, and persuasive, while still presenting information through a specific viewpoint. Audiences should evaluate the creator's sources, evidence, and rhetorical strategies before accepting a message. These examples show how the media bias is not only about what information is included, it is also about how information is framed, explained, and presented to influence an audience. Public response to Epstein files. The public response to the Epstein files has been different depending on people's backgrounds, experiences, and beliefs. These different reactions show that the audiences do not simply receive information. Instead, they interpret information through their own values and perspectives. The first response comes from conservative audiences. Many conservative audiences have been focused on the government, transparency, and accountability. Their questions often involve whether government agencies and public officials have released enough info. This response often relies on logos because discussions focus on documents, timelines, and official statements. The second response comes from progressive audiences. Many progressive audiences have focused on accountability, inequality, and whether wealthy or powerful individuals receive different treatment from ordinary citizens. This response often uses pathos by focusing on victims, justice, and concerns about powerful people avoiding consequences. The third response comes from younger social media audiences. Many people learn about major news stories through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and other platforms. Their responses often include frustration in traditional institutions and a desire for more transparency. However, social media can also create platforms because emotional or shocking content can spread faster than carefully researched information. The fourth response comes from legal professionals and researchers. These groups often focus on evidence, court procedures, and what can actually be proven. Their approach relies heavily on logos because they prioritize documentation and verified information over speculation. The fifth response comes from victim advocacy communities. These groups often focus on survivors and responsible reporting. Their concern is that political arguments and public controversy should not distract from the people who experienced harm. These different responses demonstrate that people's identities, experiences, and communities influence how they interpret media messages. Two people can view the same story and come away with different conclusions because they focus on different parts of the information. Social media algorithms and media bias. Social media algorithms often influence how people understand political and social issues because platforms recommend content based on user behavior. If someone regularly watches content supporting one viewpoint, the platform may continue recommending similar videos and posts. Over time, people may see fewer opposing perspectives and mostly encounter information that supports what they already believe. This can create what is called an information bubble. Many people feel like they are seeing the complete picture when they are actually seeing a limited selection of information. This is why understanding media rhetoric is important. The way information is presented can influence audiences just as much as the information itself. Conclusion. The Epstein files demonstrate how media biases and rhetorical strategies influence public understanding. Different media organizations can discuss similar events but present them differently depending on their audience, goals, and perspective. MSNBC often emphasizes accountability and institutional responsibility. The New York Times focuses on investigation and context. Reuters prioritizes verified facts. Fox News emphasizes transparency and public trust. The New York Post uses a more dramatic style focused on controversy and reaction. Independent journalists add another layer because they often communicate directly with audiences and provide more personal explanations. However, their content must also be evaluated carefully because personal opinions and emotional appeals can influence how information is understood. Understanding media rhetoric and media bias is important because people interact with persuasive messages every day. News organizations, influencers, and social media platforms all make choices about what information receives attention and how it is presented. Media literacy does not mean believing one side or rejecting all sources. It means learning how to analyze messages, compare perspectives, evaluate evidence, and make informed decisions about the information we consume.